Good morning and welcome. Oh, wow, people are really feeling it. I'm hearing a lot of good mornings come back. It's a call and response. I like that. And good morning to all of you out there whose voices I cannot hear, but whose presence we feel. And so from that place of awareness and connection, I'd like to invite us all to take a moment to close our eyes and bathe ourselves in the awareness of the love of the divine. That great love that expresses through and as all of life, that fills this room, that animates the heart of each and every person here, and that threads that connection between us all, that creates this wonderful community that we call Light on the Mountains. And so from that place of awareness and stillness, I give thanks for and bless this morning. I give thanks for this sanctuary, for all those who make it their purpose to bring this service to life, to our wonderful musicians, our Ellen Max, to the board that serves to steward us forward, and to all the volunteers that work throughout the week to make this morning happen, and to Reverend John, who captains our ship 24/7 throughout the day, throughout the year, and who brings us his always perfect message this morning. And so from this place of awareness and gratitude and fullness, I give thanks, and together we say, and so it is. So there is a stretch of river in the Stanley Basin called the Lazy River. I'm not sure that's the actual name, a name you'd see on a map, but this particular section of river has earned the name the Lazy River due to the way that the flow slows way down, meandering through lush meadows, at times doubling back on itself like a snake trying to swallow its own tail. It's a perfect place to relax on anything that floats, an inner tube, a paddleboard, whatever might inflate and support you. It's also a perfect place to be as lazy and unhurried and as peaceful as the river itself. I thought about the lazy river for a few reasons this week. I thought about it when I read Reverend John's blog as he used a river metaphor to discuss being in the flow of life. I also thought about it after a discussion a few of us had about how we might go about raising our vibration and expanding our Christ consciousness. The question asked was, what might one do? What methods and practices might one employ to effect that shift? Now, the most accurate answer to that, of course, is you do whatever works for you. That said, my personal take is that the shift to a higher realization and consciousness has more to do with being than with doing, more to do with releasing and allowing than with adding effort, goals, and practices to our day. In fact, I was thinking that a lazy river, real or metaphorical, might be just the right place for that releasing and allowing to occur. The perfect place to ease into divine flow and to allow all efforting to drift away downstream, along with anything else that is ready to be released. Because here's the thing. We are not here to remake ourselves. We are here to reveal ourselves, to reveal our divine nature that has always been there, but that we have buried under the burdens of our false and limiting beliefs, those erroneous and insubstantial ideas that we have endowed with such great and ponderous weight, packing them like cold mud over the luminosity of our being. So our task here isn't so much to do, but to undo. So if you're okay with this, I would like to invite us right now to undo a bit as we take an imaginary float on the lazy river. If it feels comfortable to you, let's close our eyes and let ourselves slip into the gentle flow of the lazy river and simply allow the welcoming water to support and carry us. Knowing ourselves in this river as perfectly buoyant, as completely loved, and always safe. As we do so, let's feel the gentle water wash over our body, feel it wash over our heart, and as it does, let's allow that old, cold, crusty mud that's been covering your golden self to dissipate into the waters as you release all density, all heaviness, all fear. Let all judgments and resentments loosen and drift away, all envy, anxiety, all self-reproach, all of it destined to dissolve into the nothingness that it is, while we are carried always, from now into infinity, by the great love of Source, within which we live, move, and have our being. For Source is the river. It is the flow of life. It is us. Namaste. And now, how perfectly, our affirmation for August. It's on your insert and in red, and it says, how perfectly, I am in the greater flow of life as I elevate my consciousness to the frequency of love. Okay, next.
Good.
There's my microphone.
John, I meant to tell you your microphone is right there. I knew there was something else I was supposed to tell you.
I mean, I speak pretty loudly, but the people at home might not be hearing me right now while I get dressed.
Okay. John is putting on his microphone now.
There. Now I'm real. Thank you. Well, see, it's such a good lesson. So, sitting there, doing what I'm supposed to be doing and thinking, oh, I forgot the microphone. Where is it? Maybe I should run around the building. Maybe I should go panically ask the live stream person, do they have it? Or are they holding it from me? Maybe I left it in the bathroom in the back when I went there earlier. Or I could just say, the worst thing that happened, I could make RL take the hand mic out of the seat here, and it would be just fine. But interesting how we do that. It's like, it's not exactly the way I think it should be. So I have to obsess about it. Anyway, that's a whole nother talk for another day. Maybe not. So in that, which is related kind of, so what is this? Okay. What do you do when you decide that you want to invite something different and new in your life? What is your kind of go-to thing? Is it like here, panic, run around, see if I can find it, or are there other ways to do it? I think sometimes we kind of jump the gun a little bit, so to speak. We might think, when you're setting an intention or a goal, you might instantly think, well, what does that goal look like, and what is that experience, and how do I get it, and how do I, and you might put even a picture on your board here that that's the thing I want. But there's so much that goes leading up to that point, first of all. And even if you're going to use a spiritual practice or prayer to help bring that forth, to ask yourself, well, how do I use that tool? We can obsess on the thing without stopping to think, what does the thing represent? So, I mean, anything that you, just stuff for fun. It doesn't have to be like big life-changing, change your life sort of things, but if there's something you think you want, well, what does that represent to you? Because haven't you, we all have, we said, oh, I've got to have this thing, and I just know it's going to do this for me, and you get it and go, really didn't. So it must be some other thing. and we obsess about that other thing. So to start with, well, what am I really looking to experience here? And as I'm getting closer to what that experience I want, how can I utilize a spiritual practice or prayer to do that? Well, I have found too that it's helpful to get out of, I need to get the thing mode. That's a very spiritual term there. I need to get the thing mode. That I think one of the most powerful prayers in spiritual practice is to ask for, align yourself with two things. One is to ask for guidance, as Sarah had mentioned, that to guidance and alignment with something we call the Christ consciousness, which is a spiritual principle. It's knowing that we are connected and aligned with all that there is, and that our true and higher self is really in alignment with that. So guidance we can seek by consciously elevating to that ever available resource. Other thing that we often pray for, or as we get late-breaking prayer requests every Wednesday, is to be in flow, as Sarah was talking about. And flow, we often will think of a river or something. But here's this weird thing about flow. It's a little bit more complicated at times than you think. So this week's blog, I wrote a little story, a remembrance of how not to be in the flow. Like the worst possible way to fall out of the flow. And it's really a great true story. A few years ago, I was on a conference, I think it was in Denver, and for Center Spiritual Living, what's great about these things, I get to see a lot of my friends and colleagues that I don't get to see because we're living in the outback here. And in the upper lobby, I had early morning meeting some friends for some coffee at one of the Starbucks that they have there, and then going on to a day full of activities. And we're leaving like, oh yeah, we've got to go do our things. And then I was going to take the escalator down to the lower part to go to where I was going to go. And as soon as I stepped on, coffee in hand, I realized I left something that I had bought and had a little bit of value, so I needed to get it. And so without thinking, I turned around and tried to go up the escalator. Don't do that. No, really, don't do that. Even if you think you're just one step down, don't do that. No, really, because it seemed like such a good idea at the moment because I was right there, and there was one step away, and I could just go right back as opposed to going all the way down and coming back up. But again, don't do that. So within 2 seconds, I was on my, I think, left or right knee, tore my trousers, drew blood, and was wearing the vente, I want to tell you, not the little one, the vente, all over myself. And I think at that point, I just sat on the step and took the ride of shame down. Again, torn trousers, bloody, coffee all over me. Of course, it was probably a white shirt like this, something along that line. And then, of course, I had to just make my way to the elevator, go back up to the hotel room and regroup a little bit, literally lick my wound, so to speak. And I don't even know what I did to the rest of the day. That's not being in the flow. I just want you to know that. But it is interesting how, on occasion, we choose that option. That it seems like a really good idea to do something that, in retrospect, is not such a good idea. And in the heat of the moment, it is interesting how often we can make poor decisions. But let's look at this idea of the flow in a sense. But here's my take on this, that regardless of circumstances, you actually can't not be in the flow. Just want you to know that. There's not this outlying thing of, we come into this idea as human beings of self-worth of, oh, they're in the flow, I'm not in the flow, what did I do wrong? I should be a better person, I'd be in the better flow. How that it goes on here. So by rights of who you are as a spiritual being, you cannot be in the greater flow of life and universal Christ consciousness, but we can mess with it a little bit. We can take detours. We can do things that makes it look like that we are really not in the flow. And my opinion is that this system is automatic and self-correcting. And sometimes it has you fall down escalators and wear coffee. And it's more like not because you're a bad person, it's saying, that really wasn't such a good idea. Let's rethink this again. So if you're in anywhere of your part of your life now, and we're all at different parts, that it seems not very flow-like, actually you are. And you need to learn to read the water a little bit differently. So Sarah gave a great example of the lazy river. Isn't that how we like to think the flow of life? Just a nice, easy, lazy river. Yesterday, went down, brought Will the Wonder Dog to Draper Preserve. The river's really low right now. It's great to send your dog in to go swimming. You don't have to worry about anything happening. You could go in swimming, nothing bad will probably happen. And you notice if you throw the stick and, not always being the brightest dog misses it, it just, slowly meanders down to some other dog will get it down the way. It's all great. But at certain parts of our life, it doesn't look that flowy. It doesn't look so easy river. And sometimes the river is more like the rivers I grew up with. You say, John, you grew up in Los Angeles. Believe it or not, there are actually what we call rivers there. There is. So what you don't probably realize, if you're not from Southern California, is that in the 1930s, the rivers in LA were concreted up. And if you've driven freeways there or flown into LAX, maybe on the way to somewhere else, you thought, what are these wide concrete things that there's not cars on it? I understand freeways, but there's these big things that you could put like 8 to 10 lanes if it was a highway. And down the very center is this little spit of stream of water that goes down. You think, they spent a lot of money on concrete for that little stream of water, didn't they? But actually, the reason why they did this is because the LA basin is prone to flash flooding. And there are many pictures of way before the 30s that I grew up as a kid seeing, of neighborhoods just under, several feet of water from this flash flooding. And if you see the concrete, lanes during a rainy time, you will see this thing that was a spit of water suddenly, just this torrent. And it's a mess. And you think of, it sounds like nice rapids. Let's get a little, canoe or something. No, you don't want to take, it's kind of like the escalator thing. Don't do it. One, it's full of debris. It's full of toxic runoff. It's quite dangerous. You wouldn't put a wetsuit, you'd be dead. No, I'm just saying, not that I want to live in the negative, but no, you'd be dead, quite frankly. There's no daredevil that says, hey, let's hit the LA River during flash flood season. You just don't do that. You really just don't do that. And you wouldn't even put a larger, pleasure boat or something. Just not going to work out. Again, it's going to be more like the escalator experience that I just told you about. But here's the thing. So in this analogy of the flow, all moving bodies of water leads to one source, like the ocean. And even when it is showing up in a way that seems dangerous or precarious, it's still going to the one source. Interesting here, even though in Idaho, we are considered in the Pacific Northwest. Well, the ocean isn't even anywhere close to here. The reason why it's determined to be part of the Pacific Northwest is most of our rivers drain into the Pacific up into the Seattle and Oregon area. It all flows to the same source. But your experience on those rivers can be very different depending on the season and where you are in any number of circumstances. It all gets you there eventually. Sometimes it's gentle, sometimes not so much. So I love the analogy of course, consciously stepping into this great flow and being supported in great ease, but to know that there's certain parts of our life, individually and collectively, where it's going to be LA runoff season. I think as we've shared world events and events of our country those last 5 years, definitely flash flood season. Yeah, I don't think it's been all that, the experience has not been gentle. I think we have all been like, what's going on? What's the lesson here? What are we supposed to do? Do I leave the country? Do I move to Antarctica? What's the solution here? It's to realize is that, no, we're not out of the flow. We are being invited to be more deeply in it in a very complex time. And that can also be true in different episodes of our life. So I think this is a great analogy. So again, if it's runoff season in your life, actually you didn't do anything wrong per se. You're not out of the flow, but it's time to really pay attention. I mean, you get into that rushing water, you're going to get to the source, but it's time to pay attention to what you're doing in a way that you might not be doing so if you're in the lazy river sort of experience. So let's just look at this. So again, you're looking to expand your life in some way. You're looking to expand an experience, invite something into your life. And again, what does this mean to me? And envision that you're going to consciously step into this river, into this flow. Well, we want things right away, don't we? So I'll think about how I'm going to do this later. Maybe I'll just jump in right away and get it over with. Again, it's the escalator kind of analogy again. Don't want to overplay that card, but it really kind of is. So if you are consciously ready to take a step into higher elevated consciousness in your life and to attain something, do something, or even to just expand your awareness, there's two things that we ask ourselves. And this is pretty simple. So you get in your car and you're going to drive somewhere that you've never been to before. You're going to either consciously or unconsciously ask yourself two questions. Where am I right now? So get your GPS on your phone. It usually says, where's your starting point? Work, home, Starbucks, where you have to put that in. And then you have to tell it where you want to go, basically. And it sets a route. So rather than just jumping in, where are you and how did you get there? And where do you hope to be? Seems obvious, doesn't it? But we often don't do that much insight. So where are you? Not just geographically, not what type of river you're contemplating going in, but what state of consciousness, what type of beliefs about yourself and the world has brought you to this jumping off point that you are today. And every day is a jumping off point. It's not like I'm waiting for a graduation or a start of a new job or something like that. Every day that you get up is a jumping off point. So what brings me to this point here? Does my life feel that it's not very much in a flow? Am I not really clear of my destination, what it represents to me? So where are you? And where do you hope to be? So when we think about this, is to think in an elevated consciousness in a sense, not so much just point A, point B, but when we are contemplating a journey of sorts, what we're really looking at on some level are a couple things. We're looking at what we refer to as a growth in consciousness, meaning that I am not kind of stuck in an area where I believe something is limited is true for me, that I want to expand what I believe is possible for me. And again, to elevate, first of all, what is possible, but what thoughts and beliefs have got me to where I am. In some reading I did this week, there used an analogy that on some respects is one of the most overused analogies that we use. But I'm going to use it a little bit differently. So in business, you need to think outside the box to be successful. Haven't you heard that a million times? And don't you, when someone says that, it's like, get a new business plan. I'm tired of that analogy. But using that to think, where we are, how have we, through what we think is possible for us, in a sense, boxed us in? I mean, think of that. We carry kind of an energy field of kind of boxing ourselves in of what we think is possible for us. And a way to kind of monitor that, or to see, like, you know, where is it? So where's my box boundaries here? So as you're going along, let's say this weekend, and someone comes up to you and say, gee, we're going on this big, amazing trip to blank. Well, let's not say blank. We're going on this amazing 4-week trip backpacking through Europe. And it's going to be the luxury thing. You're going to backpack to these great things, and then you're going to get like spa treatments. Doesn't that sound kind of nice? The older you get, the more you want. Less backpacking, more spa treatments. This is how this works. You know, the kids in the back, you're more about backpacking, we're about the spa treatments. I mean, it really is a ratio that changes as you get older. So your first thing might be, well, that sounds great, but then your next thing would be either, that sounds great, where do I sign up? Or it could be, that sounds great, but I could never do that. I mean, think of it. So what did you think when I said the backpack spa treatment version? At first it was like, oh, then it was like, oh. Did you think, oh, I could never walk that far? Think of, God, it costs so much money to get there, how could I ever afford the spa treatments? Are the spa treatments come included somehow? I mean, all those things of possibly, again, where are we boxed in, and where your limitations are, at least that we have set for ourselves, that when someone suggests something that just seems big and amazing and whatever, your reaction shows your personal boundaries of where you have boxed yourself in. Now, I'm not saying that to show that you're high in consciousness, that if you're, I don't know, kind of tight on money right now, that you should just get out the credit card and sign up and saying, I'm going to trust the universe or God or whatever, that they're going to pay my American Express bills. That's not the way that it works. What it does work is to say, well, isn't this interesting that whenever someone comes up to me and say they're going to do this amazing thing, after I go, that sounds great, my next reaction is, oh, I could never do that. And I list the reasons why. And when you do that, you never even explore how you might be able to do that. That if money is an issue, well, how could I start squirreling away a little extra money and make a goal and save that up? Or if, gosh, who would ever want to walk that far to think, well, maybe if I start walking every day now, I could eventually do that. So we cut off that like, well, what if sort of thing to say, well, no, that just doesn't, it never really works for me. So again, you're at the river and saying, how did I get here? To look at where are all the things that I tell myself I can, and where are all the things I tell myself that I can't. Because if you're hoping for greater flow in your life, if you're going on a premise that you can't, guess what? Easy flow into what you can't do. You're supported by, oh, I'll never be able to do that. I'm in the easy flow river telling me that I'll never be able to do that, never have the spot treatment. So to ask yourself, where have I boxed myself in? And what does it take now to expand those boundaries a bit? And again, it's not so much as setting a goal or intention of doing the thing, but what is the underlying thing that I need to work on? That this thing that we call grow in consciousness. How do I need to expand my boundaries and elevate what I believe is possible for me? And what it really involves, if you want to really get down to just a bullet point or two, is that we are seeking a level of healing within ourselves, healing away from one idea of I can't to an idea that if I want to, I can. That anytime we have a shift in consciousness in some way, it is a sense of healing or elevating to a state of consciousness or frequency where we know that it's possible, if we still want to do it or not. Or it's a lot more possible than we thought so before. So when we think about it, healing is a state that is our natural state. And we have talked ourselves into believing that it's not. In fact, it is such a natural state that it is not something that you have to, in a sense, get. It's something that you have to realize that you have already. It's always an uncovering, not a getting. And so that's how this intention goal thing is a little off kilter, the way that we think of it as human beings. It's always we think, I have to get something, as opposed to realize I have access to it already. That, again, it's not an amount of getting, it's an amount of realizing that it's available. And so as we, in a sense, pray for guidance and to be in a sense of flow, that's what the flow is. Regardless if you're in a runoff period of your life from floods or the lazy river, that it is just something naturally that we are part of, and our job as spiritual human beings is to realize is that we can be more conscious of its availability as opposed to telling us that we can't. It sounds simple, and I know that, but in actually doing it, it can take a lot. We really are attached to those beliefs that we have taken years to create. That people telling us that we can't or we shouldn't for any number of reasons, because of gender or age or skin color, that you can't, shouldn't, won't sort of thing. And it takes a lot sometimes to go past cultural conditioning to realize, oh, we are kind of built and devised on the I can program as opposed to the I can't program. So in elevating this consciousness is to realize is that there are always invitations to take the wrong turn on the escalator. There's always things to go into those beliefs that tell us that we're not enough or we can't or we never will. And that elevating our consciousness is to go to that next step. That read this week in our reading of a different take on this concept that if you're raised in any sort of Christian upbringing that you're familiar with. Who was raised with the idea of turning the other cheek? You've heard of it. There's rumors about that. I think I saw it on a blog somewhere. So the way that I was raised to believe it in, and it is true to a certain extent as opposed to how I was talking about it this week, is in a sense that, and as a kid it just didn't seem to make sense in this way. And again, I went to Catholic school and I thought, have these nuns actually lived life? Have they really tried this out into the field a little bit? Like, have they actually done this? So this whole idea is that if someone, in this version of it, harms you, that rather than like going, battling them, is that you're supposed to turn the other cheek and say, well, you hit this side. And I thought, that makes absolutely no sense. Who does that? I mean, it just doesn't work. But the whole point of that actually is to say that if you have been harmed in some way, that you're not going to deal with that issue at that level of energy or consciousness. That turn the other cheek means, I'm just not going to deal with this at this level. This has nothing to do with me, with who I am or what I do. That you're not necessarily going to become a human doormat. You're just not going to deal with it at that level. You're going to raise in consciousness and go from a higher level and deal with whatever this is. So it's not running away and saying, hit me again. It's saying, it is absolutely ridiculous to deal with this at this level of consciousness. And remembering the hundreds of times that I have tried to deal with it at that level of consciousness and where it got me and didn't get me. So there is this great growth of realizing, oh, this has never worked before. It set up a repeating pattern in my life that we just kept slogging and wrestling at it right here, and turning the other cheek is saying, I'm really tired of that. I'm not going to do it in that way any longer. I don't have to live at that level of drama. I can do something differently. I can, in a sense, open up to a greater healing and flow in my life, knowing that that's not the truth of who I am. And if I've realized and even have said many times over the years before, is that when you stop playing at that level of consciousness with someone, and so let's say it's a habitual thing, you're always going at it, they kind of don't know what to do when you won't play at that level anymore. Like, okay, when I say this hurtful thing, you always say that hurtful thing. Isn't that our agreement? We've done it for 30 years. And so when you turn the other cheek and don't do it at that level, you make a change. You reveal healing. There is a higher state and level of consciousness that you're now dedicated to be at. So in this weird part of history that we are in the world, you cannot be out of the flow. We as a group cannot be out of the flow. There is a sense of flash flooding going on, but it's leading to the same place of oneness and wholeness and healing. Yes, we might have to give it a little bit more attention than in other times. Again, you're not going to jump without thought, into the LA River during flash flood season. But there's a way to deal with it. And we do that through seeking guidance and to more consciously be in the flow. And I just want to close today with, this is a great little thing, 365 Science of Mind, a saying for each and every day. You get the connection, 365? So, it's called The Law of Good Brings Me Satisfaction. There is a power operating through, a presence inspiring, an intelligence guiding, and a law of good sustaining you. Upon this presence, this power, and this spiritual law, you may place complete reliance. Because you live in divine presence, and because it is in you, you may know that the creative law of good, which is infinite, and which has all power, can do for you and bring to you anything and everything necessary to your complete happiness. Its whole desire is for you to be one with freedom and joy. So let's just take this within. And so let us give great thanks this morning for this incredible morning, this cool morning, this smokeless morning. And know that all is existing right in perfection. And let us now envision that the truth of who we are. We are in the greater flow of spirit and of life. And we affirm here today that we elevate our game, so to speak, that we push the boundaries of what we thought is possible. We push the boundaries of what we thought we were worthy of. We push the boundaries to that higher vibration of the Christ consciousness, knowing that we are connected to all that there is. And in this connection, we are shown the way. And in this connection, we are shown that we are one with all. And so in this, we know that all is ultimately in perfection. Some things are uncomfortable, but it is still in the flow. And we give thanks knowing and contributing and participating on the level that we came here to do. So in this, we simply express our thanks. And we take this intention, this goal, this idea of truth, and just release it and let it go. We release it into the flow of spirit, into the flow of life. And we know that as we truly let it go, amazing things happen. And so it is.